Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us on this paranormal pit stop. Tonight, we'll be exploring an infamous ghost town nestled along the Virgin River, just to the south of Zion National Park in Utah, that was originally established by Mormon pioneers, and that retains a number of intact structures for viewing, which have even acted as set in a range of films through the years. Recognized as one of the most photographed ghost towns in the American West, and purported to harbor multiple supernatural infestations tied to its past, are you prepared to explore the history and hauntings of Grafton? Historically, following Brigham Young's settlement in the valley of the Great Salt Lake in 1847, he would desire the expanse be filled with fellow church members, and eventually would wish the area to be recognized as a state of Deseret from which he and his peers could practice their religion without persecution. Young would order families and single men, who he'd instructed to marry immediately, to the south, in what was called the Cotton Mission, resulting in a number of communities along the upper Virgin River, including that of Virgin itself in 1857. And in 1859, 5 prominent families from Virgin would work together to establish a small settlement called Wheeler. However, following Wheeler's destruction by a week-long flood in January of 1862, this newer town site would be formed a mile or so upstream and would be re-established as New Grafton, after Grafton, Massachusetts. Within 2 years, Grafton boasted a populace of around 168, spread over 28 different families, and hosted a number of log houses, a post office, a school and community hall, a church, and more. Additionally, each local family farmed around 1 acre of land bordering the Virgin, which, with the help of man-made canals, supported orchards, cotton gardens, and other important agricultural resources. While at times Grafton could be a paradise, unfortunately, continued flooding would result in ruined crops, destroyed structures, and eroded lands, and issues with attacks by tribes native to the region in 1866 through the Black Hawk War would eventually lead to settlers evacuating to Rockville for a period, and not returning again until 1868. Subsequently, in 1868, a series of devastating floods would cause a majority of the church's members to give up on Grafton entirely in favor of more successful communities. In 1886, Grafton's waning populace would rally to construct a 2-story schoolhouse, which would also be utilized as a church and community center. On a side note, this structure has been preserved, can still be viewed, and holds the mantle of being one of the most photographed buildings in the U.S. By the turn of the century, while a number of nearby town sites, including Schunesburg and Duncan's Retreat, had been abandoned entirely, Grafton would soldier on, maintaining a handful of residents, though most would give up on any attempts at farming due to the region's sporadic flooding, and would instead take up ranching. In 1906, after the completion of the Hurricane Canal, which allowed for water 20 miles downstream, a number of Grafton families would pack up and move to Hurricane, and following another slew of flooding in 1909, the community's hopes would begin to sink. From 1918 to 1919, Grafton's schools would teach their last classes, at which time the town's student populace sat at just 9, and the following year, remaining students would attend school in Rockville. By 1920, Grafton's populace had dwindled to just 3 families. In 1921, the local Mormon church was discontinued, and in 1944, some of the area's last residents moved away. Today, this historic site, which contains several original buildings alongside the 1862 Grafton Cemetery, is managed by the Grafton Heritage Partnership Project, a nonprofit organization focused on the ongoing preservation of the expanse. While the town itself is open for viewing, with tours available, it is important for any interested in visiting to note that surrounding farmlands and several houses are still in use, so it's pertinent all boundaries and signs be respected. Life through Grafton's early and middle years was harsh, and death often came swift, by way of disease, accidents, attacks by native tribes, floods, and through other perils. And while the official interment tally for the Grafton Cemetery is charted at only 84, some claim it contains countless additional unmarked burials. Those who've braved this old yard have reported orbs in the backgrounds of photography, abnormal Battery death rates, and encounters with strange mists that float about, namely after dark. Sadly, infant mortality in Grafton was fairly common, as displayed by the number of markers belonging to children, and some tell that if one visits the graveyard in overcast weather or late in the evening, they might just hear the phantom sounds of babies crying, laughter from children, or possibly even chilling screams of agony. Also reported at the cemetery and through what's left of the nearby town are run-ins with a ghostly woman in a calico dress with her hair in a bun, who's usually spied sobbing as she wanders about. This sad spirit looks so real that she's often mistaken for an actor by tourists before she fades away in front of their eyes. Reported through remaining structures of Grafton are disembodied footsteps, voices and whispers, strange lights sighted zipping about after dark, and encounters with the manifestations of two little girls, who some claim died when their swing broke, that like to appear to children visiting the site. Several informal investigations of the expanse have yielded high EMF levels, chilling EVPs, frequent electronic malfunctions, and a number of ghostly forms captured in both photography and video. And seemingly ancient legends tell of a skinwalker, or an evil sorcerer with the ability to transform into various animals or abominations that lives somewhere nearby. Lastly, throughout both the town site and graveyard, a handful of accounts detail the feelings of being watched, followed, or even of being touched by presences unseen, and encounters with both shadowy forms that stalk lone walkers, and with full-bodied entities in clothing spanning the eras. Thanks for tuning in for this Paranormal Pit Stop. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Good night.